The photograph was taken in the winter of 1972, a picture that should never have existed at all. In it, two boys stand outside a small rural police station in Pennsylvania. Their faces show no fear, no relief, no emotion of any kind, just emptiness, a hollow, carved-out look, as if something inside them had been removed and nothing was placed back. The detective who took that picture kept it hidden in his desk drawer for 31 years. He never showed it to anyone. And when he died in 2003, his daughter found the photo with a single note paper clip to the back. It read only, "They told the truth. That's what destroyed everything." For more than 5 decades, the case of the Reeves boys has remained one of the most unsettling mysteries in American history. Not because of what happened to them, but because of what they said happened. Their confession did not solve the case. It shattered it. It pulled apart every assumption, every theory, until the investigation collapsed like a structure built on rotten wood. Millertown, Pennsylvania, was a place small enough to disappear between county lines. A population of 417. A quiet town where everyone knew everyone, and where secrets lived in the spaces between familiar greetings and Sunday church pews. On October 28, 1971, two brothers, 12-year-old Michael Reeves and 9-year-old Daniel, vanished while walking home from school along County Road 14, a lonely 2-mile stretch cutting through thick woods. When they didn't arrive home by 4 o'clock, their mother assumed they had stopped at a nearby farm. By 6, she was terrified. By 7, the entire town was sweeping the woods with flashlights and rifles. Nothing was found. Not a shoe. Not a backpack. Not a scrap of clothing. It was as if the opened its mouth and swallowed the boys whole. For 3 months, Millertown was consumed by the search. Local police called the state investigators. The state called the FBI. Reporters flooded the town. Cameras flashed. The Reeves family's grief became national news. But as winter deepened and hope thinned, the search efforts slowed. The FBI packed their equipment. The reporters chased newer stories. Millertown returned to something like normal, but a darker kind of normal. Doors stayed locked. Children no longer walked alone. And behind closed blinds and hushed conversations, people spoke of drifters, predators, or the old Chamberlain House abandoned, decaying, and whispered to be cursed. The case went cold until the day the Reeves boys walked out of the woods. On the morning of January 18th, 1972, 91 days after they vanished, the Reeves brothers simply walked out of the forest. They didn't run, didn't cry, didn't stumble like children who had been lost for months. They moved with slow, steady precision, one behind the other, like soldiers marching toward an unseen destination. A dairy farmer named Ernest Kowalski was the first to see them. He noticed them at dawn, moving along the tree line near his property, 7 miles north of where they had disappeared. He later told investigators that the strangest part wasn't that the missing boys had returned. It was the way they walked, synchronized, emotionless, completely unaware of him. He called out to them. They didn't respond. They didn't look at him. They just kept moving until they reached the side of the county road. Then they sat down and waited. When officers arrived 20 minutes later, the boys were seated side by side, hands folded neatly in their laps. They were wearing the exact same clothes they'd worn the day they disappeared, though the fabric was torn, stained, and rotted in places. Their hair had grown wild. Their fingernails were thick with dirt, yet medically they were unharmed. No signs of starvation, no dehydration, no injuries. In fact, doctors described their physical condition as remarkably normal, considering they had supposedly survived 3 winter months in the woods. Millertown erupted in celebration. Church bells rang. Neighbors cried. Their mother collapsed when she saw them, sobbing so hard she could barely stand. For a brief moment, the entire country rejoiced with her. Newspapers called it a miracle. Television anchors smiled. America needed a hopeful story. And this one seemed perfect. But the miracle began to sour almost immediately. The boys didn't speak, not to their mother, not to doctors, not to police. They ate when food was placed in front of them, slept when told, followed simple instructions, but their eyes stayed blank, their faces expressionless, their minds seemingly far away. When their mother hugged them, they allowed it as passively as mannequins being moved into place. Specialists were flown in from Philadelphia. FBI agents returned to town. The boys were interviewed separately in carefully designed child-friendly rooms. For days, they said nothing. Not a word. People began to talk. Maybe the boys weren't kidnapped at all. Maybe they had run away. Maybe this was some strange prank or psychological stunt. The warmth of the town's welcome began to cool. Suspicion crept in. Then, on February 3rd, 16 days after emerging from the woods, 12-year-old Michael Reeves finally spoke Dot. And when he did, the entire investigation began to collapse. When Michael finally spoke, he didn't ease into the truth. He delivered it with the flat, steady voice of someone reciting facts he no longer cared to understand. FBI Special Agent Howard Brennan, man with 17 years of experience interviewing traumatized children, sat across from him. Brennan had faced monsters in human form and never flinched. But even he later wrote that nothing had prepared him for Michael Reeves. The first questions were simple. Are you hungry? Are you comfortable? Do you know where you are? Michael answered each with short, mechanical words. No, yes, yes. His expression never changed. Brennan tried small talk about school and friends, hoping to stir something. Familiar, nothing worked. The boy reacted like a machine built to mimic human speech. Finally, Brennan asked the question he'd been circling. Michael, can you tell me where you were? Who took you? For the first time, Michael lifted his eyes and met Brennan's gaze. We were never taken, he said softly. We went willingly. Brennan paused the interview, shaken. When he asked what that meant, Michael answered without hesitation, as if he had practiced these lines 1,000 times. We went to the place beneath the Chamberlain House. We went because we were invited. We stayed because we wanted to learn. The Chamberlain House, a decaying husk at the edge of town. Teenagers whispered that it was haunted, that voices came from beneath the floorboards. Bet the last Chamberlain woman had died alone doing things decent people didn't talk about. But these were rumors, childhood dares, and ghost stories. Or so everyone believed. Brennan asked Michael what he meant by beneath. Who invited them? The boy tilted his head slightly, as if searching. For a language simple enough for humans to understand? The shepherd, Michael said. He lives below. He's been there longer than the house. Longer than the town. He called to us, not with words, with feelings. Promises. He showed us things no one else could see. Brennan's notes record 7 full seconds of stunned silence. What things did he show you? Brennan asked. Michael's lips curved into a smile. It was the first hint of emotion he'd shown since returning, but it wasn't a child's smile. It was old, knowing. Wrong. He showed us what people really are, Michael whispered. Under the skin. Under the faces they pretend with. He showed us the truth. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Against all protocol, Brennan brought Daniel into the same room. He needed to know if the younger boy would tell the same impossible story, or if Michael's confession was a psychological distortion. Daniel sat beside Michael without being asked. Their hands folded in the same position, their posture identical. When Brennan asked Daniel the same questions, the 9-year-old answered in the same flat tone, with the same eerie calm. But Daniel added something new. He doesn't have a face like we do, Daniel said. He wears faces? Different ones? Sometimes he wore my father's face. Sometimes the pastor's. That's how he made us trust him at first. But underneath, there's nothing. Just darkness at things. The interview lasted 4 hours. The boys described following the shepherd into the woods, entering the Chamberlain House, and descending through a hidden door into a network of tunnels that stretched for miles. Tunnels older than the town, older than any settler, older than... The stories written in human memory, they described lessons in the dark, how to see without light, how to silence pain, how to hear the language that existed before human speech. They spoke of other children in those tunnels. A girl whose skin had turned translucent, a boy with no eyes who could still see, twins who shared a single heartbeat. When Brennan asked why they finally left, both boys gave the same answer. The shepherd said we were ready, Michael said. He told us to go home, Daniel added. He said it was our turn to help him gather more. When the recorder was switched off, Brennan wrote in his sealed report, I do not believe the Reeves children are lying. I believe they are telling the truth exactly as they understand it, and that is what terrifies me. Within 24 hours, a tactical team was mobilized. They were going into the Chamberlain House. The tactical team reached the Chamberlain property at dawn the next morning. The house was a collapsed skeleton of Victorian wood, its windows hollow like eye sockets, its porch sagging like a broken jaw. 13 years of abandonment had left, it rotting, crooked, and swallowed by vines. But the boys' testimony forced investigators to treat it not as a haunted ruin, but as a crime scene. Inside, the house felt less like a building and more like a corpse decomposing in slow motion. Ceilings had caved in. Mold crawled across the wallpaper in cancer-like blotches. Raccoon nests, bird skeletons, rusted springs from broken furniture. Everything was dust, decay, and animal remains. The air tasted stale and heavy, thick with the smell of organic rot. And then they found the basement door lay hidden beneath a rug that had fused to the floorboards. When they peeled it back, they discovered a solid oak door reinforced with iron bands. Strangely, it showed no signs of rust, no moisture damage, nothing to indicate it had aged alongside the rest of the house. It looked almost new. When the officers pried it open, a breath of cold air rose from below, unnaturally cold, far colder than the basement of an abandoned home should have been. And the smell that came with it made two officers gag. Not rot, not mold. Something mineral, ancient, like the air of a tomb sealed for centuries. Flashlights barely cut through the blackness as the team descended the stone steps. The basement was carved directly into the bedrock. It was larger than the first floor of the house. And in the far corner, behind a collapsed shelving unit, they found exactly what the Reeves boys had described. A doorway, 7 feet tall, 4 feet wide, carved into the stone wall with deliberate precision. Tool marks, chisels, or hammers were still visible in the rock. Human hands had made this passage, but no one knew when or why. The team entered the passageway. It sloped downward at a steady angle, twisting deeper into the earth like the tunnel of some ancient burrowing creature. After 20 feet, the natural smell of stone changed damp, metallic, and strangely sweet. They found scratch marks along the walls, small handprints, and a hand down the passage. They discovered a child's shoe so decayed it crumbled untouched. 200 feet from the entrance. The passage opened into a chamber. It was roughly circular, about 30 feet across, with a ceiling so high their flashlights couldn't reach it. The walls were covered in symbols, deep, deliberate carvings arranged in patterns that made the eyes ache if stared at too long. Some investigators swore the shapes seemed to move, to shift just at the edge of vision. In the center of the chamber. The floor dipped into a shallow depression. It was stained black, a stain that soaked into the stone itself. Lab tests later confirmed it was human blood, multiple donors. Some blood was months old, some decades, but there were no bodies. No bones, no scraps of clothing, no sign of the other children the Reeves boys had described. The cadaver dogs behaved strangely. They sniffed the chamber once and then turned away, uninterested almost. Afraid, ground-penetrating radar detected nothing beyond the chamber, no secret rooms, no deeper tunnels. The entire structure ended abruptly in that one circular room. A dead end. The physical evidence told one story. The boys told another, and the truth dissolved somewhere in between. Forensic historians estimated the carvings on the walls could date back to the 1700s, possibly earlier. Yet there was no record of any structure or settlement on that land before the Chamberlain House was built in 1873. Local indigenous tribes I had no stories referencing anything like this place. It was as if the chamber had been carved into a blind spot of history known to no one, remembered by no one, yet undeniably old. The investigators sealed the passage. The basement door was locked and later filled with concrete. The Chamberlain House was demolished 6 months later, replaced by a paved parking lot, but the damage was already done. Once the boys said they went willingly. Once they described the shepherd not as a kidnapper, but a teacher, the town turned against them, against their mother, against the entire Reeves family. Fear gave way to suspicion, accusations, whispered rumors of cults and rituals. Anonymous threats slipped into their mailbox. 2 years after the boys returned, the Reeves family left Millertown in the dead of night. No forwarding address, no goodbye. They vanished again. But this time by choice, for decades after the Reeves family disappeared from Millertown. Their story faded into the dusty corners of unsolved mystery books, late-night documentaries, and obscure internet threads. People remembered it the way they remembered campfire stories, uneasily, distantly, as something strange and tragic, but ultimately unreachable. The case had no answers, no closure, nothing solid to hold, except fear. But in 2004, a private investigator named Carolyn Webb could not let it rest. Webb had grown up only 40 miles from Millertown, and the story of the Reeves boys had haunted her childhood like a shadow that never quite stayed behind her. As an adult, with resources and an investigator's instinct, she began searching for what happened after the family fled Pennsylvania. Her search took 18 months. She learned that Dorothy Reeves, the boy's mother, had died in 1991 in a small Oregon town alone. Cancer, but the hospice nurse who cared for her remembered Dorothy vividly. She would ask again and again if her sons were in the room, even though they never visited, even though no one had heard from them in years. In her final hours, Dorothy apologized into empty air, whispering that she should have known better, that she should have stopped them before it was too late. Webb tracked down Michael Reeves in 2005. He was 46 years old, living under a different name in rural Montana. He worked as a night security guard at a lumber mill job for someone who didn't want to be seen. He agreed to meet Webb only once at 2 in the morning in a silent diner lit by buzzing fluorescent lights. Michael sat across from her and answered the questions that had gone unasked for 33 years. When Webb cautiously asked about the tunnels, about the shepherd, about the other children, Michael stared at his untouched coffee for a long, strained moment. When he finally spoke, his voice still carried that same hollow quality recorded in 1972. "You want me to say it was trauma," he said. "That we invented a story to survive something terrible. That's what everyone wants. It's easier that way." Webb asked him what the alternative was. Michael looked at her, really looked, and Webb later wrote that his eyes were the most terrifying thing she had ever seen. Not because they were empty, but because they were awake, aware, and hopeless. The alternative, he whispered, is that we told the truth. He said there are places in this world where the rules we trust don't apply. Places older than names, older than towns, older than the oldest human stories. Something has been feeding on children for centuries, long before anyone built a house on that land. Long before Millertown existed. And it's still down there, Michael said. Still calling. Webb asked whether he kept in touch with his younger brother. Michael shook his head. "Daniel made a different choice than I did. I came back to the surface and tried to forget. He went back." She asked him when Daniel went back, but Michael didn't answer. He simply stood, left a few bills on a table, and walked out into the Montana darkness. She never saw him again. 3 months later, Michael Reeves was found dead in his apartment. Heart failure. No history of cardiac issues. Age 40-6. Webb spent 2 more years trying to find Daniel Reeves. She never succeeded, but she found something else, something that tied the past to the present in a way she could never unsee. Between 1972 and 2007, 9 children had vanished from small towns within a 100-mile radius of where Millertown once stood. All between the ages of 8 and 13. All disappeared in late afternoon, on quiet rural roads. And in every case, other children later reported seeing a man who looked familiar, but wrong. A face they trusted, a face borrowed, a face worn exactly as Daniel had described. Today, the parking lot built over the old Chamberlain property still exists. By gay, it's ordinary and unremarkable. But maintenance workers have reported strange things. Sudden cold, spots in summer heat, pavement cracking without cause, and at night when the lot is empty, sounds rising up from beneath the concrete. Not voices. Something older than voices. Something that might be calling. The Reeves boys returned in 1972. Their confession destroyed the case. Maybe that was the point. Maybe some truths don't solve mysteries. Maybe they erase them. Maybe. Some doors, once opened, can never fully close. And maybe, somewhere beneath the ground we walk on without thinking, something ancient is still teaching lessons to children we've stopped looking for. For years after Michael Reeves' death, the case drifted back into silence. Carolyn Webb kept her notes, her theories, her sleepless nights, but there's nothing more she could do. Without Daniel, without witnesses, without physical evidence, the story slipped once again into the fog of urban legend and forgotten fear. Yet even as the world forgot, the ground beneath Millertown did not die in 2008. The first new sign appeared. A maintenance worker named Harold Minton filed a complaint with the county. Nothing dramatic. Nothing supernatural. Just a report of persistent vibration under the asphalt in the north corner of the parking lot that replaced the old Chamberlain property. He described it as a low-frequency hum, almost like heavy machinery operating far underground. Engineers inspected the site. Their equipment picked up nothing, yet Harold insisted he could feel it in his bones, like something very large breathing slowly. 3 months later, Harold quit his job without explanation. His wife reported that he had become paranoid, refusing to stand near drains, avoiding basements, and claiming he heard someone whispering his name whenever he walked near wooded areas. 2 years later, he vanished. His truck was found on a rural road 30 miles away, engine still warm. Harold was never seen again. Carolyn Webb kept track of every disappearance within a 120-mile radius of Millertown. Patterns emerged. Each child vanished near dusk. Each was walking alone. Each had, days before disappearing, told a friend or sibling about seeing someone familiar standing at the edge of the trees. A father, a teacher, a pastor, sometimes smiling, sometimes calling their name, but never someone who was actually there. By 2011, the pattern had shifted. It wasn't just children anymore. A young woman named Emily, Grant reported seeing her dead uncle standing near the tree line outside her home. A hunter saw his long-deceased brother kneeling beside a creek. A school janitor claimed he saw his childhood friend missing for 35 years standing in the hallway after midnight, wearing the exact clothes he vanished in. Emily tried to dismiss the sighting as stress, but she described something else too. The overwhelming sense that the figure was not truly wearing her uncle's face, but something underneath that face. Was watching her. Something hungry. Carolyn Webb, frustrated and nearing 50, returned to the Chamberlain site herself. One overcast evening, she stood alone in the parking lot's far corner, the one Harold had complained about. The air was colder there, the asphalt slightly sunken. She knelt, pressing her palm to the ground. She felt it instantly, a faint, rhythmic vibration, slow, steady, almost like a heartbeat. But deeper. Older. Wrong. She jerked her hand back, breath shaking. The shepherd, the entity the Reeves boys described, had never truly left. It had only waited. The concrete and asphalt had muted its presence, but not erased it. And now, after decades of silence, the call was returning. 3 nights later, a child disappeared from a town 20 miles away. A boy named Lucas, age 10, last seen walking home from a friend's house. His younger sister told investigators. He had been acting strangely, complaining that someone who looked like Dad kept watching him from the woods. Even though their father had been out of town for work, the search for Lucas lasted a week. No tracks, no belongings. No body. On the eighth day, a shoe was found near a drainage tunnel, dark, wet, coated in a strange mineral residue. No one could identify it was a child's shoe dot, just like the one found in the tunnel beneath the Chamberlain House in 1972. Webb reviewed the case and realized something horrifying. For 35 years, the disappearances had been sporadic, one every few years. But now, in the last 3 years, they were accelerating. Something underground was stirring again. Something hungry. But the worst discovery came in late 2013. A highway repair. Crew digging near an old service road uncovered a cavity beneath the asphalt. At first, they thought it was a sinkhole. Then they found tool marks ancient, chiseled into stone. Then they found an opening, a passageway, narrower than the one at the Chamberlain House. But leading downward. Deep. Older. The workers sealed it immediately. Terrified, the state sent a geological team. The report was brief, clinical, and deliberately vague. Subsurface, void of unknown age, unstable, not naturally formed. Carolyn Webb was not vague. She wrote in her notes, there are more tunnels, more entrances. The shepherd's domain is bigger than anyone imagined. She also wrote, one last line circled in red ink. If Daniel went back, he is not alone.